Hello, I hope you all are doing so well today. I had this thought before I started recording that oftentimes what I do is do 4 or 5 takes of the video because I'll have a kind of a lapse in my thought process. But what happens with that is that then I forget if I've actually said what I said in the actual recording. So I thought today I'm not gonna stop and redo it. I'm just gonna allow for the pauses if they come, because I don't want to miss capturing any of the thoughts I've been having. And there's been a lot. And I feel like I've been absent from my work and from kind of sharing what I've been experiencing and feeling and thinking about for quite some time. And at first I thought it was because something was wrong, which again, looking back, this is always part of the process, right? When we think we're lost, it's actually when we're in the process of finding ourselves at deeper and deeper levels. It's just a repetitive tool that we experience on this journey. And yet, as I'm starting to kind of resurface from what I did not realize was a very, very kind of deep dive in my life, the overwhelming sense that I have uncovered some things in myself, and of course the greater collective, right? Because we all have similar experiences, because we are all connected, all made of the same stuff. Our consciousnesses are very much connected at levels we can only begin to imagine. So I know that when I talk about anything that I've experienced, even the smallest kind of details, on some level, somewhere, it's going to resonate with someone. And this is all part of the greater picture, too, of understanding how much everything is so interconnected. And I don't mean that on a surface level, like we are all one, and we all have to have compassion and understanding for everyone's journey. Although that's also true, right? And this is the confusion, right, of where we are when we enter this world, when we come into a human body, when we try to relate, understand, find our way, but also witnessing the suffering of those who are in a different place than we are, and all of the things that we struggle with in terms of finally surrendering into our own truth, which ultimately is the creator in all of us. And it's hard to package everything into one video, of course. That's been going on these last 9 months. But today, and over the course of the last couple of days, I'm having some very deep realizations around power and control. And this entire journey that I've been on since I started to, what we call, awaken, which always confused me a bit, because then I look at these things from a more logical perspective, and I don't think logic is wrong to use. In fact, we talk about the intelligence of the cosmos, of the universe, right, as being this logos energy. There is an inherent intelligence in energy and consciousness anyway. And all of this splitting out and fragmentation and shattering that occurs as we actually try to piece things together for ourselves. And part of what I've started to yes, it's being shown to me now in actual images, but my experience, my life was that, again, when I started to awaken, or at least become aware of something else inside of me. And this is where it's challenging, right? Because even as children, we have that awareness, but we get shut down by the conditioning and programming. So I'm talking about this kind of resurgence. And again, we all experience it differently, right? But something that breaks us open, and where we say, okay, well, what I've been doing so far hasn't been fulfilling, and there must be more, and I feel there's more. And sometimes it just comes through as an internal struggle, right? As anxiety and depression and a feeling of hopelessness or wandering or darkness or shadow, right? Maybe we can't always articulate it, but something within us says, what's the point of all of this? And that in and of itself is really us recognizing and asking, where is this light within us, right? So none of it is wrong, and we all go about it different ways. And my experience of it was that when I started to become aware of these things through the human mind, that I was taken on a very long journey into all things spiritual. And that for me was actually, looking back now in hindsight, more of an imprisonment in and of itself. And that spirituality here has really turned into this cage. It's really kind of dehumanized the human experience, because the human experience itself is the merging of energy and matter, and we have source inside of us. And so anything where we think we have to go and find this connection is almost an inversion of what already is. And it's not to say that spirituality is wrong. I think there were good intentions behind much of this, and yet in the human desire to make sense of things, and from all these different perceptions and perspectives that we have, it added a layer of imprisonment and entanglement. But can we really say even those who perhaps speak from a spiritual place of enlightenment, or that we might view as having the answers, are themselves somehow trapped in that? Because I don't believe, and I've never believed, and yet this has kind of been my search, that we have to spend the rest of our existence here in this lifetime being spiritual and being enlightened. That's inherently who and what we are. And so in some ways I feel like if we're still talking about it from that perspective, we're still somewhat upside down in our knowing and understanding of what's really going on here. And of course those things can, and many times are, stairs, stepstones, right, on the path and on the journey. One of the things that has come up very strongly today is this understanding that, I think so many of us have been in these situations where we've been abused and traumatized, and trying to understand that and get out of that is a challenge in and of itself. But once we are at a point where we can start to look at it more deeply, there's a narrative in the spiritual community that we're attacked and targeted, and as empaths we suffer narcissistic abuse and under kind of this psychopathic rule of patriarchy and whatnot. And yet, today is really a convergence. It's an opening, and it's a simultaneous opening and receiving of absolute truth, which in this realm, there's no absolute truth, right? There are many different truths based on our experiences, our journeys, where we are going. But yet the absolute truth is that we are all of the same stuff. And so where I may have in the past thought okay, these things happened to me, I was traumatized. Part of the narrative is that, well, we suffer trauma in order to understand it, in order to help other people get out of it. And at certain levels, I'm sure that's true, right? But what I'm seeing today is that there are energies inside of me where I've struggled with trying to understand my lack of power, lack of feeling empowered, and then also recognizing and feeling this very viscerally. The only reason I'm feeling that is because at some point I also participated in that, right? At some point I also disempowered others in some other lifetime, in some other way. You know, intentionally or unintentionally, we've all been there. We experience the all of everything. And so recognizing, of course, not intentionally in this lifetime, but through my understanding and trying to unravel these feelings inside of myself, the only way that I could feel those things is if I had some remnant of the other side of that within me. And having to come to some very brutal, honest truths about the way that I have perceived events in this lifetime, you know, thinking I was being attacked and tormented, and certainly it felt like that, and certainly it was that. And also I've always said, well, these individuals are also doing what was done to them in some other way, perhaps some other lifetime. So it's all related and it's all connected. And I think back most strongly, and I think a lot of us have had these experiences where we relate to this twin flame story. And I think that has been the greatest teacher for me in terms of understanding, what are we really doing here? You know, as empaths and healers, we think it's our job to heal others. Of course, we know that's not true. All we can do is really hold space for another to come to their own truth and understanding. They are healing themselves. And they have to come to a place where they are ready for that, right? And if they're not, it's because there are still more realizations that they need to have, more growth around these issues. And yet, whereas empathic beings or beings who think that they know more than others, have we gone against that sovereignty, right? That free will of each individual to choose. And it's like, hold on a second, we have to look at the basis of this, which is that if we believe we are the light and we embody the light and that we all embody the light and we are all entitled to our freedom and sovereignty, where have we held others back from that? And I think back to this relationship that I had, and, you know, this, maybe not even a relationship, a situation though, right? And with this twin flame story, there's this idea that there's someone, one person, right, that you're supposed to be with. But so often we see, and this is generally through the divine feminine energy, that there is this ownership then and this resentment that builds, that this masculine energy is not coming forward and not healing and all these crazy things. And it's like, but through the human consciousness and through their own energy, they have to also agree and want this, right? And this is what we say, this is the basis of divine partnership and sacred union, is that two people are ready and willing to deeply look at themselves, and they are committed to that path of love in the exchange of love first and foremost. And so if we're trying to engage in a situation where the other side is not at all committed, not at all interested in growth, ultimately what we're trying to do is control that person, that person's way of thinking, that person's choices. We are trying to guide and direct their path in a way which we feel will most serve us. And that's really the basis of narcissism. This negative energy of control and power. And we could say, well, that's not, it's very subtle, but it's the same thing. And I was struggling, and the way that I came to this understanding was that even though I'm in a completely different place now, I was still feeling that energy come in, and I was completely confused because I had said I'm kind of done with that. It's not working for me. It's not serving me. It's just making me feel worse. I'm done with that version of this energy. And yet it would still come into my energy field. And I had to really look at it, blaming the other person, saying, oh my God, they're siphoning my energy. They're using my energy for something. But what was my side of the street? And I really thought I had cleaned up my side of the street. But I had to ask myself, as in all situations, what am I gaining from this, that this is still here? What is it within me that won't let this go? Because we know that if we are completely finished with something and we have learned our lessons and we have come to a place of forgiveness and peace about it, it no longer bothers us. And so why was this still bothering me? And it was so much easier to say, well, this is darkness and this is the devil and this person is awful and uses people, etc., etc., etc. But the truth of it was that on some level, that gave me a sense of power, right? To think that someone was so attracted to my energy in some way that they would continuously come back, even if it was years apart, it made me feel good. It made me feel some sense of power. It's not something I would ever say that I felt like I was doing, and it certainly didn't look that way from the outside. But inside, there was something I was getting from that, right? You know, and then a sense too, and I think this is very true for many people, where a lot of these individuals are kind of untouchable or unreachable, right? They have large networks. They're very social. They have, a lot of them, a lot of times we're like, well, they're players, right? They have all these people coming and going in their lives. And there is a sense, at least I think this is what was going on in me, that, oh, look at this person. Nobody can tie this down. Nobody can get to this. If I could get to this, this would really mean something. This is not a conscious thought I had at all, right? But subconsciously, there was something underneath all of this. You know, having that energy, that person see me, even if it was just for a moment, being triggered by that, someone actually seeing me for the light that I am. And yet I was almost blinded by that, right? And so many of us say, well, this person feels like home, and they truly saw me and they truly got me. And that may be right and very true, except what's actually happening is they're seeing the truth of who you are and the light in you. It's not that they are your home. They're reflecting to you who you are. And yet, of course, we twist, and in all of our trauma and everything else, it can get really complex and confusing. But truly, they're showing us who we are. And a lot of that feeling of home, though, is also trauma bonding. Trauma is very comforting. You know, it's not the trauma itself, right? But that feeling, we know this, like it's very hard to get out of these traumatic situations or these abusive situations because it's what we know. It's what we can perceive, and we perceive the ebbing and flowing of that abuse, right? Where we can predict what's going to happen. It's very similar to what happened to us in childhood. So there's a familiarity about it, but it's not healthy. It's not growth. It's not evolution. It's a form of stagnancy. So many times that's actually what we are attracted to through the human experience, through the cells and the flesh. And we can certainly convince ourselves that this is the best relationship we've ever had, or the deepest sense of connection we've ever felt. And that may be very, very true, except none of it is for the right reasons. None of it is for actual expansion of light. It's for soul growth. It's for understanding where we've been trapped and where we have, in fact, entrapped others in the past. And now we're playing that out. You know, I wouldn't necessarily say it's karma, except, you know, karma is about energy coming back to us, right? So in many ways, this is how I'm seeing it today. You know, in some other lifetime, and even in this lifetime, of course, because it's still playing out and releasing, right? Where I have been afraid to allow others to be who they are, to go on their own journey, because I'm afraid that they'll leave me, because I'm afraid that I will be left with less than what I have right now. This is really the base of it all. This is the crux of it all. And it's the basis of the spiritual distortion that's here. Most of spirituality, right? I'm trying to avoid the sun that's trying to peek through here. Most of spirituality is about siphoning in control. Not intentionally, I'm sure, right? But through the human experience, and then of course all the negativity and distortion that's here, it takes this on. So realizing, at least for myself, right, the deeper form of imprisonment came from coming into contact with spiritual teachings and being very, very confused because, again, what that doesn't account for is our choice, right? So just as I was recognizing in this twin flame dilemma, whatever it is, and to me that is really the darkest form of entrapment we could experience through a human at this point. But I really do feel it was a learning experience because I had to come to terms with how I was doing it in my own self. Thinking that I was helping this person, trying to free this person from the darkness, when in fact, it feels like it was a contractual journey, right? Understanding where in myself I've done this to others. These are layers that are so deeply buried within us. And unless we're willing to be completely and brutally honest with ourselves, we're not going to be able to find it. But since I've admitted that to myself, it's opened up so many other levels of awareness around this. And that all the teachings and the teachers and the mentors and the courses that I've come in contact with on some level have also had a level of restriction within it too, a level of lockdown, a level of my opinion, my intuition is invalid. And yet, isn't that exactly what we're here to do? Full and complete sovereignty within each of us. We are each valid and whole and complete when we come in here. The job is not to find ourselves. We're already connected to ourselves. And the conditioning and programming shuts that down, right? But then also the spirituality, as you try to open it up, shuts it down at a deeper level. But I do believe these are the lessons that are coming up now, recognizing where we've done this to others in the past. And this is the freedom that we have now here on this earth to open up to all lifetimes and experiences where we've done this. And I have this kind of fervent prayer inside of me now at this point, show me where I have resentment and fear and anger towards others because of what is still trapped inside me, because of the way that I've done this to others in the past, to show me so clearly how to free myself by showing me where I have enslaved others, intentionally or unintentionally. Even if it was that I was asked or, my life depended on, either I die or I work on the other side, who knows how it happens, right? But somewhere I violated my own light, my own knowing. Knowing that this is the deep recognition I have to come to in myself in order to feel free finally. There's this concept too that everything physical starts with an energetic or spiritual issue, right? I haven't talked about this a whole lot, but I've been going through this Atlas realignment, and as I was preparing, and my daughter is going through it too, so I've been doing a lot of research, I thought, wow, no, there's actually something physically wrong with me that's been causing this shutdown in my body, and therefore my own connection to my energy. Except that when I had the adjustment, there was such a visceral release in my body that I started crying. And it took a few weeks to realize that, no, I actually asked to be shut down. I had the sense that as I was coming closer to the earth, to this energy, I could feel the negativity and the distortion that was here. And in my panic and in my fear, it was like, I do not want to show myself. I do not want to have to transmit this light because it feels dark and dangerous and scary. And I would have never said that, right? Because we go through life now and we say, well, of course I want to be in my power. I don't want to struggle. I don't want to suffer. I don't want to feel like I'm miserable and everything in my life is going wrong. Why would I ever ask to be disempowered? And yet we know through the human experience, the human body is so sensitive. It picks up on energies and it takes that in and it starts to create based on it. That's what's so miraculous about the body itself, is that it can create anything that it desires, but that's also part of what is so challenging, is that it can create anything that it feels and desires, almost unconsciously, right? So this powerful machine that we are, we have to be so clear and intentional. And that's part of this process, right? Recognizing where we have been so unconscious and asleep in our body. But when I had this realignment, this visceral recognition within myself that I, in fact, asked for this. And over the last several days, realizing it's almost like there was a part of me that felt into that level of darkness and was terrified because there was a recognition that I also somehow was a part of it. Didn't want to have to face that, didn't want to have to come to terms with it. I actually didn't want to heal because it was so traumatizing. But this isn't anything I would have said 2 weeks ago. But I can feel it. I can feel the truth of it. And there's so many layers and levels to this thing that we call the matrix, right? I think sometimes I've looked at people and some of their messages resonate, and other times I think I don't resonate with that at all. Most times I think we're just broadcasting from different areas of the matrix, which is trauma and wounding, right? So we resolve something, we think we've mastered it, and then we find something else. Or maybe we're just stuck in a certain corner of it, right? So understanding that we're all projecting and broadcasting from different places of wounding, even if we think we have the right answer, right? This is what evolution is. My message today is what my message is tomorrow. It's going to change. In another couple weeks, it could be something totally different. But right now, this is what's appropriate, and this is what I'm feeling, and this is what I'm understanding. Right? And the only truth is that we all have our own truths, and that they will constantly change based on where we are, and where we're at in our own evolution. But for myself, and I would assume then many others, right? This is part of the deep recognition this week. This is what is opened up within us, within this atmosphere, to be received. How we have contributed to the overpowering and over control that exists here. But also this very poignant opportunity to see that, to forgive ourselves for that, and to make different choices now, to be different, to move forward in a different way. At such a deep level of integrity. So this is where I feel I'm at now, is to forgive myself, first and foremost, for not seeing this, for not understanding it, and then looking at all the ways I have contributed to this in this lifetime too. You know, I can see even with my children where I've held on so tightly because of some kind of fear around that. Them going their own way, or them speaking their truths, right? And feeling challenged by it, or feeling like the world wouldn't accept them. And so somehow I did to them exactly what was done to me, right? So it's all related. this magnificent connection of all these webs. But it always comes back to us and what's inside of us. We're all a part of this web. And yet really what seems to be the key is understanding and really knowing that and accepting that and seeing where this is within us and how we've played it out in others' lives. And that's really the true, real freedom, right? Is that we want freedom and sovereignty for ourselves. And can we allow for that for everyone else in our lives too? It's not our job to tell people what to do. It's not our job to guide their course. The best we can do is be who we are and allow others to be who they are. And that's true freedom, true sisterhood, and true brotherhood, that we support each other in all ways to do this. So I hope today finds you well. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Take good care.